Thanks. Okay, good afternoon, dear students and dear participants, and good afternoon, dear Alison Wielback. And today we are going to have another next session of teaching and learning legal English. And as you're probably aware, we are having this series of event starting from the early February, and today we are going to invite one of our long-awaited guests, Dr. Alison Wielback. And first of all, I'm not sure my voice is audible. I need to check this one. Am I audible? Can you hear me? Okay, that's nice. That's great. Okay, so welcome to our event, and let me check the security permissions and share screen permission for our participants. So it's a great honor to invite our guest speaker, Dr. Alison Wielback from Switzerland. And as you probably know, she is the author, co-author of the very famous book called Legal English Manual. And as you probably know, we have been using this book in our classes, and probably we have seen a couple of exercises during our lessons. And we added this material as a great source to each of our classes. And honestly, I was hesitant to invite Dr. Alison Wielback to our event, and I wasn't sure she would respond or even say yes to my invitation. But I am so happy to see her in our events, and she said yes, and I invited her, and she's going to today we are going to talk about writing and editing, and especially we are going to focus on the legal English, I believe, and we're going to just have this session with her. And as you're probably aware, we have been having these sessions every day, or twice or three times in every week. And today is going to be the fifth session, and today our guest speaker will be Dr. Alison Wielback. Let me give a couple of information about her background. And I believe she has been teaching English for more than 15 years. And once I read, it was starting from 2024, and it's a long year, like nearly 20 years. And probably you can go to legalenglishskills.com website to get more information about her. And you may probably know because of this book, and this book is really masterwork, and I believe you can find them very useful. And okay, so now to microphone to our guest speaker. Welcome, Dr. Alison Wielback.
Professor Termanov, thank you so much for your kind words, and a warm welcome to all distinguished teachers, students, and guests. It's a great honor to be here, even if only virtually, in Tashkent. where I have the pleasure, as you know, of addressing you on the subject of writing and editing skills in legal English. Let me start by sharing my screen. So, there we go. Is it that one? Yeah. I had it all set up before, so let's hope it's going to do what I want it to do now. I might have to start
now it's visible.
again. So is it there now? I need the full screen. Oh dear, that's not what I want at all. Cancel. It doesn't. Ah, here we go. All right. Thank you very much for your patience. So, did you know that all lawyers write, but not all lawyers write well? Why is it important that lawyers learn to write well? Well, one answer might be that according to legal research, legal employers value writing ability more highly than almost any other skill. They know that their clients appreciate not just a lawyer's knowledge of the law, but also their ability to communicate that knowledge clearly and concisely. So my aim today is to share with you some guidelines to help you become a lawyer who writes well. To that end, the presentation is arranged as follows. To start with point 4, I understand there'll be time at the end for questions, either in the chat box or live, so I will try to answer them then. Before that, I'll be happy to share with you the resources that I refer to in this session. That's point 3. Point 2 is the main part of today's session, where we'll start by looking briefly at writing itself and then editing in more detail. But first, just a very quick introduction. Professor Sermonov has already outlined. A very long time ago now, I graduated with degrees in both English and the law, have since completed a doctorate in law and a master's in applied linguistics. As you saw, I'm a published author. So in the course of my career, I've done quite a lot of writing, not all of it good, I must confess. But it does mean, I can tell you from experience, that developing good writing skills, as with almost any other skill, is actually a lifetime occupation. Whereas today, we only have 20 minutes. So let's begin. Writing, as you'll know, is made up of a number of different stages. There's the creative stage. This may take the form of hard thinking time or brainstorming, and then hurried notes jotted on a piece of paper. This is not the time in the writing process for grammar or punctuation. It's just for recording those elusive ideas. Then there's the initial drafting process. That's the stage where you're converting your notes into text and putting them in some kind of logical order, all the while bearing in mind, of course, your target reader and the purpose of your text. And then there's the editing process, when you review what you've written from both a content and a language point of view. Is the content accurate and logically set out? Is the grammar and punctuation correct? Is the text written in a style appropriate for its readership? But we need to bear in mind too, that writing is a non-linear process. That is, all 3 stages, from the creative to the final version, are interlinked, and all 3 are indispensable. Now, it has been said that easy reading is hard writing. In other words, the process involved in producing a finished text that works for the reader can be long and hard. Now, to promote this universal truth that easy reading is hard writing, the European Commission, which, as you know, works with many different languages and drafts text on a daily basis, the European Commission has developed a handy readability test, which gives us our first and overarching writing guideline for today. In the words of the Commission, whenever you draft a text, ask yourself, is there enough white space? I would suggest never to underestimate the importance of this first point. Solid blocks of text are not reader-friendly. Instead, when writing in English, draft short paragraphs, leave blank spaces between the paragraphs, use numbered lists or bullet points, and in long and complex texts, use clear headings that act as signposts to help your reader along the way. 2 and 3, would your non-legal friends understand your text? And can it be easily and accurately translated? These 2 points have a lot in common, but essentially the point being made here is to avoid legalese, as you'll know, is that style of writing that some lawyers still use that includes very long sentences and outdated language, such as pursuant to or the said document. Prefer instead short sentences. Finally, if your text contains instructions or requests, are they clearly set out? Many years ago, I worked as a research assistant for a law professor. When he emailed me instructions, and there were many, I found that in order to understand them properly, I had to copy-paste his email into Word and then divide each of those instructions into separate points. In truth, though, that's the job of the writer, not the reader. This European Commission readability test will help ensure that your text is reader-friendly on the broad or macro level. However, according to the legal English expert Brian Garner, it's the ability to edit which is key to the quality of the final product. And one particular aspect of that editing process is what we're going to focus on next. I'm going to pause just a minute. My laptop says my internet connection is a little bit unsafe. Can I just make sure that you are able to hear me? Is everything all right?
I believe everything is all right, and we can clearly hear you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. All right, next slide. Now, I do realize this slide is not quite in focus, for which my apologies, but bear with me. It's not here to read, but to illustrate an editing anecdote I'd like to share with you. The well-known American law professor and author of Plain English for Lawyers, that's Richard Wielback, tells the story of how soon after law school, he went to work for a senior lawyer. This senior lawyer did not like long, wordy texts. When Wielback gave him what he, Wielback, thought was a finished piece of work, the lawyer would strike out whole lines, turn clauses into phrases, phrases into single words. One day, Wielback plucked up the courage to ask the lawyer how he did it. The lawyer shrugged and said, "It's not hard, just omit surplus words." Now, it's at this stage that we need to pause to consider the very nature of the words that we work with. Basically, there are 2 different kinds of words. There are the so-called working or content words and the glue or function words. The content words are the words which carry the meaning of the content. That is, you understand what the message is. Here, the words in blue, like carry, mean, and sentence, are the content words. On the other hand, the glue or function words, here in red, are the words that hold the content words together to form a proper grammatical sentence. In other words, these little function words perform a vital role, but if the proportion of function words to content words is too high, that can be an indication of a poorly drafted sentence. To show you exactly what is meant, let's have a look at two examples from Professor Wielback himself. First, a short one, and then a more challenging one. This simple sentence, as you'll see, relates to a criminal matter. It's fairly short. It's not too difficult to understand. But can we make it even shorter and more concise? To start the process of the content words, and here they are in blue: trial, jury, requested, defendant. So in this sentence of 9 words, 4 are content words. Now we can identify the function words. Here they are in red: a, by, was, by, the. 5 function words as opposed to 4 content words in a 9-word sentence. This indicates that the proportion of function words is too high. So how can we say the same thing in a tighter sentence with fewer function words? We can start by making the defendant the subject of the sentence and to move it up the front. Next, we can replace trial by jury with jury trial. So here again, the sentence has 4 content words, but the function words have been cut from 5 to 2. The sentence means the same thing, but it's tighter and a third shorter. And this is the kind of thing we're looking at when we're editing our own texts. Have I used too many words? Could I say the same thing in a shorter, more concise manner? Now, this edited sentence also conforms to the principle by which a reader actually remembers the entire content of a sentence until it's complete. In other words, the message isn't swamped by too many unnecessary words. What this means is that in English, when we read a text, what readers need to know is who did what to whom. Or if you want to convert that into a grammatical structure, when reading in English, the reader instinctively looks for the subject, the verb, and the object, as we can see here in our edited version. If we want to keep our readers happy, good writing, all good writing, requires assembling concrete words into straightforward sentences that readers find easy to grasp. That, at least, is according to the celebrated US psycholinguist, that's expert in words and brains, Steven Pinker, in his book, The Sense of Style. Now, a more challenging of Wielback's examples. This example also relates to a jury trial. That's, of course, a court case. And members of the jury, as you know, are referred to in court as the jurors. Jury instructions are those instructions that the judge gives to the jury to explain their role in the case and which laws apply. Unfortunately, however, sometimes the instructions that judges give to jurors are not very clear. This sentence is not very clear either. If you've counted, not many lawyers count the words in their sentences, but if you've counted, you'll see of the 21 words, only 7 are content words. There you can see them in blue: jurors, jury, and so on. And that means that 14 of them are function words. In this case, the content words are swamped by the function words. So how can we improve this sentence? We could start by replacing in many instances, 3 words, with 1 word like often. We can also ask whether, insofar as the jurors are concerned, is just unnecessary bulk. I mean, does it really add anything to the sentence? I think we could actually delete it. And then that because at the end looks a little bit clumsy too. How might you rewrite that sentence? Perhaps like this. The sentence is now 10 words shorter, and a full 8 of its 11 words are content words. Excellent. Same message, shorter and clearer, and not swamped by function words. Still on the subject of omitting surplus words, here are 2 further tips. Replace heavy noun phrases with a possessive or an adjective. What I often see with my own students are unnecessarily heavy noun phrases such as this, the documentation of the company, which could be much improved by this, using the possessive, the company's document, or this, to turn company into an adjective, the company documents. In other words, whenever you see a heavy noun phrase, often indicated by a shun word, here we have documentation. You write it by using the possessive or the adjective. You can also try and replace heavy noun phrases with the verb form of the noun. Here you see another typical shun word, objection. So let's take the verb, and we've got counsel objected. 2 words instead of 4, get straight to the message. And finally, when it comes to editing, once you think your text is ready, read it out loud. If, when reading it out loud, you stumble over a sentence, then that might indicate that your reader's going to find it awkward as well. Reading out loud helps to achieve a text that flows. Are the sentences and paragraphs clearly linked? Do they flow logically from each other? To recap, you can develop your writing and editing skills on 2 levels, the macro and the micro. On the macro, think about the needs of your target reader and use layout to help get your message across clearly and concisely. On the micro level, learn to spot and omit surplus words. Keep an eye on those function words and replace heavy noun phrases. So yes, writing and editing can be a lengthy process, but in the interests of your reader, the time invested in training and practice is time well invested. Indeed, an experienced Zurich attorney is quoted as saying, and their client an hour to understand, that's a badly drafted text. But if it takes the lawyer an hour to draft a text to a client who understands it within 10 minutes, that is a well-drafted text. As they say, time is money. So the less time clients spend trying to understand their lawyers, the more time they have for doing business. Which just about wraps up what I wanted to share with you today, apart from the list of resources I referred to in this session. So here they are. To save words, I've made the slide visual, but here they are also in written form. And now I think is the time, if I'm right, for questions.
Okay, I believe our students can feel free to ask their question about writing and editing from our expert. And if you have any questions, you can just drop down in a chat box if you want. Feel free to ask any questions. I was interested. Let me ask the first question myself, and I was interested in the movement towards the plain English, when it started exactly, and why we started.
That is a very good question. It actually started a long time ago, but it really picked up steam in around about the 1970s, when there was a movement both in England and America to encourage companies, especially banks and insurance companies, to draft documents, to draft contracts, which clients had to sign in a language that people could actually understand. If you've seen old contracts, you'll see solid blocks of texts, often with lots of capital letters, and language which we just don't use anymore. We didn't even use it in the 70s. And so there were these sort of twin forces in England and in America, trying to persuade the authorities, trying to persuade banks not to use this old-fashioned language anymore. And then it sort of came to a peak in England when the government of Tony Blair, that's going back a little bit, but Tony Blair came into power, oh, that must have been 80s sometime. And he said, look, we have to reform the whole legal process because it's just not working. And one part of that reformation, if you like, was making sure that the language that was used in the legal context was language that people understood. So that's when it really started to take off. And then you might recall in America, President Obama, he passed into law the Federal Act of Plain English. And there too, you saw on a federal level, any legislation which was to be drafted in the future had to be in plain English. And you'll see now across the world, constitutions are being rewritten to follow the principles of plain English. Legislation is being closely looked at. So it actually has been in the pipeline for a long time, but it's taken, as is often the case of lawyers, a long time for it to actually filter through to lawyers. I would like to ask you actually whether Tashkent does encourage their students when they're writing in English to use plain English. Is that the case?
When we teach and when we test our students, we usually have writing classes, and in that classes we usually start with simplified English, and simplified as we call it, plain English is our objective. We try to avoid outdated, very old, and very complex sentence structures. We try to make it short, but sometimes we stick to very complex old style legal English too. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to change that one, and probably because when we are testing, students will think they will get higher scores from the exam if their sentence is a bit complicated, a bit like legal English stuff, but we have both of them. We have plain English favorite teams, and we have the old legal English favorite team too.
It is difficult, isn't it? Especially because a lot of the material that one reads is written in the old style. And of course, it depends on the reader. If you know that your examiner is going to give you higher points for complicated language, clearly you're going to use complicated language. If you're talking to a client who wants to know what his chances are in an upcoming case, you're going to use plain language. So it's very much to do with readership. Do you agree that the focus relating to sentences, sure, they're grammatically correct? I'm not sure that anybody would disagree with that. The point of is because if it makes it clearer for the reader to understand, then that's clearly the case. well-structured and convincing. These are two different things. Convincing has to do with the vocabulary that you're using and the way that you present your argument. So they are linked, well-structured and convincing, but not all texts set out to convince anybody. Structure, of course, will always be an issue, and that's always important. Yeah, here we go. No, we don't use simple English. I think here is a problem too. We're not talking about simple English. We're not talking about talking down to the client. We're not talking about the sort of language you might use with a 3-year-old. This is not the case. What we're talking about is taking complex ideas. And as you'll know in law, there are a lot of complex concepts and trying to explain them in such a way that the person reading or listening can understand the point you're trying to get across. And this is what makes it so difficult. I think sometimes, especially if one's task is to write an essay, we tend to stick with the language that we're reading, especially if we're not 100% sure of what it means, but hey, that author wrote it, so it must be right. This, of course, is very tempting. I'm sure we all do it. But the idea is to step back from that and say, what is really going on here? What are we really trying to say? That's the difficult bit. If I may, I do have another question for the students. Now, it could be that you are already very familiar with the idea of content words and function words. It could be that you are already avid readers of Professor Wielback's book. Is that the case?
I believe the question was for Natalia Dashkevich. Ms. Dashkevich, if you will need to answer, we'd be happy.
Hello, I need to answer the question. Hello.
Go on.
I would be, I think she's asking the question one more time.
The question was, are you already aware of the content words and the function words? Have you already read Professor Wielback's excellent book on plain English?
Actually, I haven't read this book yet, or an article. I don't know what you're talking about, to be honest.
Let me give a brief answer to this question behalf of our students. When we are teaching, we usually don't categorize these sentence words as content words and extras, and instead we are going to focus on that to make it a bit simple, and like if it is in active voice, if it is in a passive voice, we try to make it active, and we try to, as you probably know, we try to use the course book Legal English for Lawyers by Kaiser Mason. It's a main course book which we are going to use during our classes, which is also suitable for TOLES examination. And in this book and in this course book, that they try to shift towards the plain English, but not so much. I believe it's not so much.
Yes, and also it's a matter of degree, isn't it? Again, plain English doesn't mean everything is reduced to its simplest. Not at all. It's, if you like, a sort of it's a concept which makes one look at one's text from a different point of view. your text can, I mean, clearly, if you're writing in law, there are going to be legal expressions, which you can't, I mean, that's what they are. But the idea is, do we really understand what they mean? Would our client really understand what they mean? So plain English doesn't mean simple to the point where it isn't even very nice to read anymore. It means, did the reader understand what I wrote? And that depends very much on the level of readership. There are a couple of questions. There's a question here, will legal writing change in the future because of introducing AI or other new technologies? That's a wonderful question. Yes, it will, but it has already been changing. You might have noticed this, but in the European Union, as you know, is working with 24, 25 different languages. And all those languages need to be translated into all the other languages. And this means that people who write for the European Union, including judges, are encouraged to write in language which is penetrable so that it can be translated. And very often texts which are written in, for example, Romanian or Bulgarian, they are first translated into English and then from English into French, German, Danish, and so on. This means that this issue itself is having a huge impact on the way people use language. It does not belong to native speakers anymore. It's stretched far beyond that. And in that sense, yes, it's been changing the language, and I have no doubt that AI will push towards something that's more universally understandable as well, which from my point of view is a pity in a way, because I love the language of literature. But when it comes to international matters, it's going to have to, it already is shifting. Okay. Any other questions?
One of my students is asking in a private chat box whether they can get this presentation as a PDF format. Is it possible? And
absolutely, I would be happy to share it. No problem at all. Should I send it to you and then you can decide?
I believe I can get this from the email, and I can spread this with my students. It would be a nice thing to do.
Good. And there is now another message on international law. Our teachers asked us all to read the conventions which were written before 1960, only in English due to the quality of the translation. Do I take it from that the translation from English, the translation into your own language was a little bit tricky to read? That's what I would understand from that. Yes. Yes, it's understandable, isn't it? And you know, the whole issue, I mean, you'll see it if you use DeepL, the whole issue of translating tools, it's big at the moment. There is one thing that, actually three things I'd like to add here. Use a spelling check by all means when you're writing in English, you probably do already. Use the grammar check by all means. Use DeepL by all means. That's, as you know, the AI translation tool that is most accessible for us, but never rely on them entirely. You still need to step back from the suggestions and think, is this what I really want? Because those tools are wonderful, but they are only tools. And in the end, it's your editing, you're looking at them very critically, which will produce the best text.
I believe we nearly reached at the end of our event, and maybe we can spend 1 more minute for the last question. And dear students, feel free if you have any questions.
If you have any questions, go ahead. Of course, my email address, should you want any further information, if I can be of any further information, I can be of any further assistance.
One of my students is asking this question in a chat box. Let me read it loud. And is it acceptable to write sentences with complex grammar structures when you are writing an article?
Absolutely, absolutely. Again, it depends on the readership. I think the point about the difficult constructions, the complex constructions, is not that you shouldn't use them, not at all. If you're able to get the message across, if the reader is able to follow the argument, that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about a text with only sentences of 20 words. It's just to raise awareness of really looking at language as a tool. You can have long sentences. You can divide it up with semicolons and colons. You can do all that, provided it reads smoothly and the message comes across. I see there is a question here. Are we talking about this professor's book or about his method? Okay. I don't think he has a method as such, but in his book, he gives you tips such as the content words and the function words, which help you to focus when you're editing.
That's nice.
Yeah.
And I believe Lola is going to ask the last question. Lola, welcome.
Good afternoon. I have one more question. Can I give you? Do you have any brochure for using juridical terms with definitions? Did you understand? Did you get?
Could
Lola,
you repeat it, please, because it went all blurry?
Okay, I can repeat. Do you have any brochure that consists of juridical terms, juridical words with definition?
Because it's so hard to hear, I didn't quite catch it. Whether it could be repeated, I'm sorry, or written in the chat box.
Hello, everyone. Can I have a word, please? Miss Wielback, thank you so much. I think about
I would so much like to hear your questions. I would so much like to hear them, but it's not coming through.
To legal terminology.
Unfortunately, the connection must be quite
audible?
bad because I'm not able to hear the questions at all. You could put them in the chat box, perhaps.
No, I'm sorry, but
Yeah, it will be better.
And I'd be very happy if you asked your questions by email, because I would so much like to answer them, but it's not coming through, I'm afraid. The internet connection is a bit dippy. Ah, here we go. Do you have any guidance on course book? On a course book related to legal terms and technology? Legal terms and terminology. What you could look at, the manual that we wrote some years ago now, the manual that we wrote, as you'll see,
Sadar, you can show us again the course book that you have, the book in your hand. The famous one.
Yeah, that one is fine. It's not actually a course book as such, as you know. There are a couple of others. I might put them when I send the slides. I can direct you to a couple of other books that you might like to have a look at. For example, there is a new one out now, but it doesn't actually concentrate on legal terms. So I'd have to think about that one. Would that be all right if I sent you the details in an email?
That would be great. That would be great. And as you're probably aware, our time is a bit limited, and we invited our keynote speaker for a short period of short presentation, and we nearly spent an hour. And if you have any questions, you can just send to me. I'll be just forwarding these questions to our keynote speaker, or if you want, you can just write an email to the following email, as you can see in your screen. And thank you, dear participants, for joining our session, and have a wonderful we had a wonderful presentation by our keynote speaker. And also, you may probably know we are going to continue our events tomorrow, and tomorrow we are going to invite a keynote speaker from Czech Republic, and also we are going to have the last event with Laszlo. We had a session, an event yesterday with Laszlo, and we will be happy to end our teaching and learning legal English events at Tashkent State University of Law. And Dr. Alison Wielback, thank you for joining us and sharing your experience, all your knowledge with our participants on behalf of Tashkent State University of Law. And I would like to thank you. And if you have time tomorrow or on February 16th, you can join our events with Sofia Bielova from Czech Republic, and the last session will be with Laszlo from Hungary. And actually, he is here, he is joining with us, and I believe
to be here. It was a great honor to be asked. And yes, thank you again to you and the students.
Thank you, dear participants, and thank you, Dr. Alison, and for joining us and sharing your all knowledge. We are really happy and delightful to see you here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
See you. Take care.